Okay, good afternoon. This is the second of our 10-minute takeaways, and this afternoon we're joined by Michael Shapiro, who is the partner leading the property team. Michael specialises in commercial property and also was kind enough to appear on the panel of our Ask the Expert last week. Since then, we've actually had some more queries sent in to us, so we thought it'd be an ideal opportunity to pick Michael's brains and take advantage of his expertise. So are you okay if I ask you a couple of questions, Michael?
Yes, Julie. Hello, everybody, on this lovely spring afternoon.
It is indeed a glorious day. Okay, first question. Client's emailed to ask to say that his business agreed terms to take a lease on a couple of floors in a City of London trophy building. They were about to instruct and then lockdown happened. So the terms are apparently advantageous and they don't want to lose it. What would you suggest they do?
Right, Julie, this is a very common question that I've been asked in the last couple of weeks, because as the commercial property market finally came out of the doldrums and the Boris bounce was effective, there were a number of new deals. January and February were very busy months for us. The first thing that I would say to the client is, don't worry, because it's not as if anybody else can take a viewing, and most agents are not going to do a deal behind anybody's back. What is important is for the client to instruct us, make sure that we've got the heads of terms, give me a ring to talk about it. And I've actually done this a couple of times in the last few weeks, picked up the phone to the landlord solicitor and said, look, client's keen, obviously your client as landlord will be keen, can we find a way to get this moving? Most people will say only too delighted. So get the draft papers in, and what I'm doing with one particular client is I'm getting all the papers agreed. The only thing that we can't get done is the final measuring survey. So we're going to have all the ducks in a row before we get, hopefully before we're allowed out and back to work again. And everybody can sort of go out and look at buildings. The client also needs to get estimates for works they've got to do. And again, that will just have to wait. But if we can get all the legals done and literally be ready to exchange leases, then hopefully everything should fall into place. It does obviously rely on the lawyers being around, but I think most lawyers are around now. Nobody's going off on holiday for Easter this year. One of the important things is obviously searches, and there are a number of local authorities that are not doing searches, or some local authorities are only doing limited searches depending what information they have got online. So that obviously, depending where it's City of London, they're not bad at all. They've got quite a lot of stuff online. One of the difficulties with the city, though, is that there are various old deeds knocking around, particularly to do with rights of light and more historic, that might well show up on a title. So it might be that there is the odd thing that we'd have to wait for. But other than that, the worst that happens is the client takes out a search indemnity policy, and we should be able to get all the paperwork agreed pretty swiftly. And then the lawyers will just agree that as soon as the lockdown ceases, we'll aim to get it done, say, within a week to 2 weeks. Particularly for clients who have got advantageous terms, I would suggest that you don't just forget about it, because I think what is going to happen is that within a week or so of lockdown stopping, everybody who was planning to move is going to be looking at premises thinking they will get a, quote, bargain. Of course, what's going to happen is the agents will be canny and think, all these people are interested, we can up the rental. So my advice to the client is stick with it, and hopefully within a couple of weeks from us all going back, we should be able to get the client exchanged and completed and into their new premises.
Excellent. Okay, well that's good news. It's not stopping things dead. So basically, your advice is, if you haven't already done so, speak to your solicitor, and there are things that can be done.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another client who said that they are a landlord with a medium-sized mixed portfolio of retail shops, one of which is a household name, pubs, a couple of gyms, and some small branches of a well-known supermarket chain. They've only received about 70% of the rents due on the March quarter. What's the best advice you can give on this?
Okay, well, the best advice is actually for a change, not entirely to follow the law. Not that I'm encouraging clients to break the law, but some of the law for collecting rents has been suspended. From the 27th of March, all proceedings that might be commenced or are in the process of being dealt with for eviction, possession proceedings for commercial property, they are all suspended, what's called a stay of proceedings. So the landlord client, I'm afraid, can do very little so far as court proceedings are concerned. Although, frankly, since that order came out, most of the courts are suspended anyway. So the landlord is still left, in theory at least, with no rent being paid. However, there are numerous ways, as we say, of skinning a cat. And the government, to give them a lot of credit, and I've actually been very impressed with the government's reaction and awareness of the property market, have, and I'm sure that we will have a tenant coming to see us very soon asking this, but there are various ways that tenants can pay. What I would suggest with landlords, though, is that they should communicate with their tenants and say, we are aware of the market, particularly if the tenants are in the sort of the retail, hospitality and leisure. There's basically almost a rent holiday and a rates holiday. So they should contact the people in a relatively nice way. I think it's important that the landlord client shows some humanity as well, because landlords are always having a bad time of it. Indeed, just looking here, I've been looking at a few articles, and there was something in yesterday's Times about commercial landlords hanging by a thread. I'll just read you the relevant para. London's biggest property owners have warned the Chancellor of the risk to financial stability if banks and lenders are not urged to show flexibility towards landlords that don't receive rent during the pandemic. Because what is happening is a lot of landlords are starting to panic. They haven't got the cash flow coming in, and it may well be this client is like that because a medium-sized portfolio probably relies on some borrowings, and they're in this sort of situation where they should contact their lenders and explain what's happened. Because obviously lenders could just come in and seize their security, but I'm not sure that would do any good. So again, flexibility from lenders, and indeed somebody who was interviewed, a well-known property person in the West End, said in the article about flexibility, we need to get this flexibility from lenders. We think this is important for financial stability as a whole. The difficulty, of course, that I see is landlords are being asked by tenants to give rent deferrals and rent holidays for occupiers that are unable to trade. So it does become a bit of a vicious circle, which is why I think it's very important for landlords to be talking, because there are various ways that tenants can pay. You know, I've had clients who, with similar percentages, have actually in the last week had another 10% worth of their entire rent roll paid. So it's like everything in the current situation. There are ways around it, ways to alleviate it, but people have to be flexible.
Okay, so flexibility is definitely the key word there. It's interesting because we've had another question in from a client who's got a small chain of up-my-kit retail clothing shop. So they're on the other side of the equation, if you like, held on a variety of leases, and these are all now shut. Staff have been furloughed, and obviously rent on the 12 shops is something that this client just cannot pay. So would the same kind of thing apply, i.e. get in touch with your landlord ASAP?
I mean, firstly, and foremost, I would say exactly the same as I would say to landlord clients. Do get in touch with your landlord. Don't just avoid paying. Don't think that the landlord won't chase you, because whilst he may give you a rent holiday, he's not going to just wipe out the arrears. But there are a couple of government initiatives which actually have impressed a number of us. Firstly, business rates for the worst areas, if you like: retail, hospitality, leisure, retail shops, cafes, restaurants, what they laughingly called drinking establishments, places we know very well, cinemas, live music venues, hotels, boarding houses, self-catering accommodation. You don't need to do anything about your rates, because the local authority will know what the designated user is, and they will either send you a bill for nil rates, or you just won't hear from them. If for some reason you get a bill for rates, do go speak. There are people at most local authorities. Do go talk with your local authority, because you should not, if you're in one of those categories, you should not be paying rates. Now, there's also a way to get your rent paid from the government, which didn't get very much publicity, but in the government daily briefings, the ones that are emailed out to us, there's a business support grant. And again, it's for the same sectors, for retail, hospitality, leisure. The property must have a rateable value of £15,000 plus, but no more than £51,000 rateable value, which should cover, other than sort of the Bond Streets of this world, it should cover the vast majority of suburban shopping centres and suburban high streets. And the government will give a £25,000 grant, which comes again via the local authority, because they know the rateable value. Now, the key to this is, obviously, you've got to have your shops in the right user class. So this particular client with their clothes shops comes under retail. And let's assume that all the client shops are under 51,000. You'd get a fairly decent suburban shop. And if it's an upmarket clothes, which it sounds to be chain, it should cover most of them. To access it, you need do nothing. The local authority will contact you if you're available. There are obviously going to be forms to fill in, because nobody's going to give you £25,000. However, under these business support initiatives, if you haven't heard, I would say within a couple of weeks, contact the local authority and they will send you the form if you've not already had it. But of course, there has been an outcry over this, because, and I'm just going to read you a little snippet from Saturday's paper, there are tensions arising in the retail industry. Ooh, that's something that doesn't often happen, as supermarkets enjoy a £3 billion business rates holiday, even though their stores are open and sales have rocketed, because obviously they've got their rates holiday, no rates. Now you can imagine one of the big supermarkets, one of the out of town, what their rates bill must be. One rival high street retailer said the supermarket should hand the relief money back and give it to the NHS. I have to say, I rather agree with that. Yes. A TV personality who is on Dragon's Den has actually said here, and I think he was right, the government took a broad brush approach because they needed to act very quickly, but it hasn't been thought out. There is a clear discrepancy for the supermarket, and that money needs to be recouped. It's no good using taxpayers' money to prop up supermarkets' share prices. I rather agree with that, and I suspect that something will be happening. But again, it's as I was saying with the question earlier from the landlord. You know, there's been an article, I'm just reading the headline here, share the pain and don't just pass it on to us, says landlord. Warehouse firm keeps payout after trade rises. This morning's paper, there's an article about Debenhams because they simply can't afford. Debenhams have got all these big stores,
Yeah.
prime sites, and they just can't afford to pay the rent and rates. They've got their rates holiday, which will be kicking in. They're asking their landlords, so today's paper says, for a 5-month rent holiday. And my advice to any client is, you know what, if Debenhams can ask for it, so can you. Pick up the phone, speak to the landlord and explain where you are. Because otherwise your landlord doesn't know, particularly if you have been a good tenant and a regular payer. Your landlord, and you know, you've observed and performed all your covenants under the lease. Your landlord doesn't know what your financial situation is. And again, looking at the previous question, the landlord as well, they need some cash flow coming in. So do apply for these business support grants. Do keep in contact with your landlords. Landlords, do keep in contact with your tenants. And if everybody can be flexible and use a bit of common sense, remember, we won't be like this forever. Hopefully by the June quarter, at the end of June, at least some of us will be back working again, and there'll be jobs starting, there'll be business starting, deals starting, and the cash flow will start again. But I think, being realistic, 5 months is about, you know, the right period of time. Because at the moment, as every business knows, cash is king, and everybody wants cash from every angle, and that's just not going to happen. So don't be in breach of your lease, don't ignore common sense, and hopefully both landlords and tenants will still have a good relationship once everybody goes back, and there won't be too many businesses that go under, and there won't be too many landlords that also are in difficulties. Okay,
thank you. There's a lot to think on there. So basically, the advice this afternoon is, in most terms, look to your local authority in terms of rates, holidays, and help that they can give in terms of loans and business loans. But also communication between yourself and your landlord, between landlords, developers, and the whole chain really just needs to communicate and be flexible.
Yeah, because, for example, people particularly who are in shopping centres and who've been shut down, there's going to be no service charge or very few service charges payable. Obviously, insurance is going to be still paid for the block. And incidentally, I would advise any client just to check the terms of their insurance policy, which I know John Sharp mentioned the other day, because you need to make sure what the terms are for the unit being empty. But again, it's using a bit of common sense, and hopefully everybody will be well.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks for your time, Michael. That's really, really useful. And I know we'll be seeing some more from you in terms of articles and from the team as well, and blogs and vlogs. So we look forward to more of your sage advice. Thank you very much.
Anybody who's got other questions, do feel free to either email me or contact me through social media, and I'll do what I can to help.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Michael. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.